I was 15 when my parents decided I was no longer their daughter, not because I ran away, not because I stole anything, but because I was scared and pregnant. The night I told them, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the glass of water my mother pushed toward me like it was poison. My father didn't yell. That was worse. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said, "You're not bringing that shame into this house." My mother cried. Not for me, for herself, for what people would say, for how it would look at church, at school, at family gatherings. "You ruined everything," she whispered. "Your future, our reputation." I was in 10th grade. I hadn't even finished algebra. I still slept with a nightlight sometimes. And that was the night they told me to leave. No hugs, no plan, no money, just my backpack, a jacket that didn't fit, and a sentence that burned into my memory. "If you walk out that door, don't ever come back." So I did. I slept on a friend's couch for 3 weeks until her parents asked questions. Then a shelter. Then another. I learned quickly how invisible a pregnant teenage girl can be. The father of the baby disappeared the moment I told him. Blocked. Gone. Like I had imagined him. I worked nights cleaning diners, mornings stocking shelves. I threw up in bathroom sinks and cried silently so no one would notice. I finished high school online. Alone. When my son was born, I named him Noah, because I needed to believe something could start over. I sent my parents one photo. Just one. They never replied. Years passed. I watched other girls get help from their families. Babysitting, college funds, Sunday dinners. I got bills. And exhaustion. And strength I didn't know a human body could hold. I put myself through community college, then transferred. Took every scholarship I could find. Learned how to smile in interviews and hide the fact that my shoes were falling apart. Noah grew up thinking our tiny apartment was a castle. "Mom," he used to say, "we don't need a big house. We just need pancakes." I built a career in tech support first, then project management, then quietly, investing. No one clapped for me. No one noticed. Until they did. When I was 32, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in 17 years. My mother. Her voice was suddenly soft. "Careful. We heard about you," she said. "About your success." I didn't correct her. I didn't tell her how many nights I cried in my car, how many times I almost quit. She cleared her throat. "We'd like to meet our grandson." There it was. Not you. Not, "We're sorry." Not, "Are you okay?" Our grandson. They sent emails, letters, even flowers to my office. My father wrote, "Blood is blood. Family comes first." That's when I realized something. They didn't want me. They wanted what they thought I had raised. They imagined a polite little boy who would forgive them, who would carry their last name, who would erase their guilt. So I replied, "I'd be open to a conversation," I wrote, "about my son." They arrived at the restaurant dressed like it was a holiday, smiling too much, talking too loud. My mother leaned forward eagerly. "So," she said, eyes shining, "where is he? What is he like? Sports? Music?" I took a slow sip of water. Then I said the sentence I had practiced for years. "He doesn't exist." The smile froze on her face. My father frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said calmly, "the son you think you're entitled to? The one you imagine forgiving you? He doesn't exist." They stared at me like I had slapped them. "I raised a child," I continued. "But you don't get to meet him. You don't get his name. You don't get his story." My mother's voice cracked. "But he's our blood." "No," I said. "He's my miracle. And you lost that privilege the night you chose reputation over your daughter." I stood up, left money on the table, and walked out without looking back. They called. They begged. They said they'd changed. But some doors don't close loudly. They close permanently. And the son they thought they could claim, he would never know their names. Noah never knew about that meeting. Not because I was hiding something out of fear, but because some truths are too heavy for a child who only knows love. To him, family was simple. It was me showing up to every school play, even when I was running on 3 hours of sleep. It was burned pancakes on Sunday mornings. It was the way I clapped the loudest at his soccer games, even when he sat on the bench. He never asked about grandparents, and I never volunteered the story. Life moved forward the way it always does, quietly, relentlessly. My career kept growing. I changed companies, negotiated salaries I never thought I'd deserve, signed contracts that made my hands shake the first time I saw the numbers. We moved into a house with a backyard, not huge, just enough. The first night there, Noah ran from room to room laughing, then hugged me so tight I had to fight tears. "Mom," he said, "we made it." That's when I knew. I already had everything my parents thought they could take back. Years later, my mother tried again. This time, it was a letter. Handwritten, shaky ink. She wrote about regret, about age, about loneliness, about how people asked questions now, and how she didn't know what to say. At the end, she wrote, "Please, let us meet him before it's too late." I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer with the others. I never replied. Because here's the truth they never understood. Being a parent isn't about biology. It's about staying when it's hard. It's about choosing love over image. It's about protecting a child, even when the world is cruel. They failed that test when I was 15, and failing it once was enough. On Noah's 18th birthday, I watched him blow out the candles, surrounded by friends, laughing, confident, kind. He hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." I smiled. He didn't know that years ago, 2 people begged for him, begged for a version of him that existed only in their guilt. But the boy standing in front of me, he belonged to a woman who was disowned, pregnant, scared, and still chose love. And that made all the difference. When Noah left for college, the house went quiet in a way I wasn't prepared for. Not lonely, just still. I found his old drawings in a box one afternoon. Stick figures, a tiny apartment. Me with a big smile and crooked hair. On the back of one, in uneven handwriting, he had written, "My mom is my hero." I sat on the floor and cried harder than I ever had when I was young. Because back then, all I wanted was to be forgiven. Now, I understood something better. I didn't need forgiveness. I needed proof that I broke the cycle. A few months later, my father passed away. I heard through a cousin. No call, no request, just information, delivered like a headline. "They asked if you'd come," she said carefully. I looked around my home. The framed photos, the silence that felt earned, not empty. "No," I replied. "I already said goodbye a long time ago." My mother tried once more after that. Her message was shorter now. No demands, no entitlement, just one line. "I hope he's happy." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing my final response. "He is, because he was loved from the start." That was the last time I ever heard from her. Today, Noah is grown, independent, gentle in a way that tells me the world didn't harden him the way it tried to harden me. Sometimes people say, "You're amazing for doing it all alone." But I wasn't alone. I had purpose. I had resolve. I had a reason to keep standing when everything told me to sit down and disappear. My parents thought disowning me would erase a mistake. Instead, it created a woman who refused to disappear. They begged for a son they thought they deserved. But the truth is simple. The version of me they rejected survived. The child they wanted to claim was raised without them, and the family they tried to protect by destroying me was never really a family at all. I didn't lose anything that mattered. I built something better. Years later, when Noah started his own life, something unexpected happened. People began telling my story, not in whispers, not with pity, but with respect. A colleague once said, "I don't know how you did it." I smiled because the truth was simple. I didn't have a choice. Strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you grow when walking away hurts less than staying broken. One afternoon, Noah called me from across the country. "Mom," he said, voice steady, "I just signed the lease." I congratulated him, asked the usual questions, listened to the sound of his confidence. Before hanging up, he paused. "I want you to know something," he said. "Everything good in me came from you." After the call ended, I sat quietly, letting the weight of those words settle, because that was the ending my parents never imagined. Not revenge, not public apologies, not dramatic reunions, just a life lived well. They thought they could come back years later and claim the reward without paying the cost. But love doesn't work that way. You don't get to abandon a child and return for the outcome. You don't get to erase cruelty with nostalgia. And you don't get access to a miracle you refuse to protect. The son they begged for? He existed, just never for them. And that was the most peaceful ending of all. I used to think closure came from confrontation, from someone admitting they were wrong, from tears, from apologies that sounded sincere. But I learned something better. Closure comes when you stop waiting. I stopped waiting for my parents to understand. I stopped waiting for them to change. I stopped waiting for a version of love they were never capable of giving. Instead, I chose the quiet victories, a fridge that was never empty, a home where laughter felt safe, a son who never doubted his worth. One evening, Noah asked me gently, "Did you ever regret keeping distance from people who hurt you?" I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said. "I regret the years I thought I had to earn love." He nodded, like he understood more than I expected. And that's when I knew. Nothing had been wasted. Not the pain. Not the struggle. Not the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering if I was enough. Because everything I lost taught me how to protect what mattered. My parents spent years begging for a grandson they thought would heal their shame. But shame doesn't heal through access. It heals through accountability. And they never chose that. So the story ends quietly. No courtroom, no inheritance battles, no last-minute forgiveness scenes. Just a woman who was disowned at 15, who built a life so full, so steady, so real, that the people who abandoned her never had a place in it again. And that was not bitterness. That was peace. There's a moment, years after the pain fades, when you finally see the full picture. Not with anger, not with sadness, but with clarity. I see my parents now not as villains, but as people who made a choice and never learned how to live with it. They chose comfort over courage, image over responsibility, silence over love, and that choice followed them longer than they ever expected. As for me, I learned early that survival doesn't ask for permission. It asks for action. I became the adult I needed when I was 15. The protector I didn't have. The voice that said, "You're not disposable." And I passed that voice on. Noah grew up knowing that mistakes don't define you. Your response does. That walking away can be an act of self-respect. That family is built by presence, not promises. Sometimes I wonder if my parents still imagine him, a boy with my eyes, their last name, a chance at redemption. But imagination is all they have left. Because the real story, the real legacy, was written without them. I didn't raise my son to carry anyone's guilt. I raised him to carry confidence. And that's why, when they begged for my son, he didn't exist. Not for them. Not ever. Time has a way of proving what words never could. I see it when Noah visits, taller now, calmer, grounded. I see it in the way he speaks to people, with respect, not fear. I see it in how he chooses kindness without mistaking it for weakness. That didn't come from luck. It came from consistency. From staying when it was hard. From choosing love even when no one was watching. If my parents ever thought disowning me would break me, they were wrong. It stripped everything away and forced me to build only what was real. No fake smiles, no conditional love, no approval that could be taken back. Just truth. And the truth is this. The moment they pushed a scared, pregnant 10th grader out the door, they didn't lose a daughter years later. They lost her that night. They lost the right to witness the woman she became. They lost the privilege of knowing the child she raised. They lost a future they assumed they could reclaim with regret. Some losses don't announce themselves loudly. They show up quietly, in empty chairs, unanswered messages, and grandchildren who grow up just fine without you. I didn't win by proving them wrong. I won by never needing their validation again. And the life I built, steady, honest, full, was the answer they never got to hear. Because when they finally begged for my son, he didn't exist. Not as a second chance. Not as forgiveness. Not as redemption. He existed only as proof that abandoning someone doesn't erase them. It frees them to become unstoppable. By the time Noah turned 25, I understood something I wish I'd known much earlier. You don't heal by rewriting the past. You heal by outgrowing it. I didn't need my parents to admit they were wrong. I didn't need them to understand my journey. And I definitely didn't need them to meet the man my son had become. Because healing isn't about inclusion. It's about boundaries. One afternoon, Noah and I were sitting on the porch, watching the sky turn orange. He asked me, almost casually, "Do you think people can lose their place in your life forever?" I smiled softly. "Yes," I said. "And that doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest." He nodded, thoughtful, like the lesson settled somewhere deep. That's when I realized the cycle had truly ended. No fear-based love, no conditional acceptance, no shame passed down like an inheritance, just choice. My parents chose to walk away when I needed them most. I chose to stay. For my child, for myself, for the life I deserved. And those choices led us to very different endings. They aged with regret. I aged with peace. They waited for a grandson they thought would redeem them. I raised a son who never needed to redeem anyone. And that is why this story doesn't end with reconciliation. It ends with freedom. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't success. It's becoming so whole that the people who broke you no longer have a role in your story at all. When people ask me now how I survived everything that happened back then, I don't talk about strength. I talk about clarity. The clarity that comes when you realize staying silent would cost you more than walking away. The clarity that tells you love should never feel like a transaction. The clarity to choose a harder road because it leads somewhere honest. I didn't build my life to prove my parents wrong. I built it because a frightened girl deserved a future, and a child deserved a mother who wouldn't disappear. That was the promise I kept. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the version of me who stood at that door at 15, backpack too heavy, heart too full, being told she was no longer welcome. If I could speak to her now, I'd say this: walk forward. Everything they say you'll lose. You'll replace with something better. And I did. I replaced rejection with resilience. I replaced shame with purpose. I replaced a broken home with one built on choice. My parents begged for my son because they believed blood could erase history. but history remembers who stayed and who didn't. So if there's one truth this life has taught me, it's this. You don't owe access to people who abandoned you at your most vulnerable. You owe loyalty to the life you fought to create, and the son they begged for, he existed, just never as their redemption, only as my reason to survive, and my proof that love, when chosen freely, changes everything. The funny thing about peace is that it doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly, like a deep breath you didn't realize you were holding for years. I felt it one morning while making coffee, standing in my own kitchen, sunlight on the counter. No fear of judgment, no waiting for approval. Just calm. That's when I knew the story was complete. Not because the past stopped existing, but because it stopped controlling me. I no longer measured my worth by who rejected me. I no longer replayed the night I was disowned, wondering what I could have said differently. There was nothing to fix. They made a choice. I made a life. Noah once said something that stayed with me. "Mom," he told me, "you taught me that love is a decision, not an obligation." I smiled, because that lesson cost me everything, and gave me more than I ever imagined. My parents thought time would soften the past enough for them to step back in. But time doesn't erase choices. It reveals their consequences. They waited for forgiveness to feel like relief. I found peace without granting it, and that's not cruelty. That's self-respect. So when people hear this story and ask, "Do you ever feel guilty?" I answer honestly, no. I feel grateful. Grateful that a frightened pregnant girl didn't give up. Grateful that a child grew up never questioning his worth. Grateful that the ending wasn't dramatic, but true. Because sometimes the most powerful ending isn't loud. It's living so fully that the people who left you behind are never part of the future you create. And that's how this story ends. Not with bitterness, not with regret, but with a life that finally belongs to me. And if this story sounds familiar to you, that's not an accident. There are more people like me than anyone wants to admit. People who were abandoned when they needed love the most. People who were told they were a mistake instead of a responsibility. If that's you, hear this. What they did to you was not a prophecy. It was a failure of character. Your future is not tied to their approval. Your worth is not frozen in the moment they walked away. And your life does not exist to heal their regret. I was disowned in 10th grade. Pregnant, scared, disposable in the eyes of the people who should have protected me. And I still built a life. Not a perfect one. A real one. One rooted in choice. In boundaries. In love that stayed. My parents begged for my son because they believed time entitled them to forgiveness. But forgiveness is not access, and regret is not accountability. The son they wanted never existed for them. What existed was a woman who survived, a child who was loved fully, and a future that didn't include those who walked away. If you're still standing at your own door right now, backpack heavy, heartbreaking, wondering if you'll make it, you will. Not because it's easy, but because walking forward is how you reclaim your life. And one day you'll look back and realize, the people who abandoned you didn't ruin your story. They just removed themselves from it.